All right, I'd like to call the regularly scheduled Planning Commission meeting to order here on March 13th, 2014. And I think we note that everyone is here. And we'll start off with the Pledge of Allegiance by Commissioner Fuentes.
Well, first of all, I'd like to remind us that this is in 2014, it is the 200th anniversary of the year of the Star-Spangled Banner. So maybe we can remember as we stand here tonight our U.S. soldiers that fought in Baltimore at Fort McHenry and defeated the British. And it was on that night that Francis Scott Key penned the poem that became our national anthem. So please join me and salute our flag and our freedom. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
So that comes to the public comments portion of the agenda. If anyone wants to address the commission about an item not listed on the agenda tonight, now is your chance. Seeing no one, that goes to now a presentation item, which is the consent calendar. So, do we have a motion?
Motion to approve.
Second.
All right, a motion is second. Let's vote. All in favor, say aye.
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 Item passes 5-0. That brings us to the public hearing portion, agenda item number 2, and I believe we probably have a staff report.
Yes, we do. Carrie Ty is here this evening with a report on this item.
Good evening, Chair Hamilton and members of the Planning Commission. Before you tonight is a somewhat unique request, and it's in the form of a property owner requested revocation of an approved site development permit. Just a quick summary of the background that's detailed in your staff report for the benefit of the audience and anybody I think tuned into the live streaming. The project address is 20 Icon, and it's located in the industrial area off of Glen Ranch Road in the Foothill Ranch Planned Community. The site backs up to the toll road. And the building was originally constructed in 1999. It's approximately 100,000 square feet, and it exists that way today. An expansion for 53,000 square feet for the back of the building was approved in 2002, and that addition was never constructed. In 2012, a tenant of the building, I should say a then tenant of the building, who had an option to lease the property, applied for a site development permit to expand the property for a research and development facility. And that site development was approved in November of 2012. And when that was approved, the previous approval for the expansion was rescinded because we didn't want to have two different conflicting approvals. And that's the typical practice for when there is an existing entitlement and a new one takes its place. You rescind the old one. Earlier, or actually late last year, we were informed by the property owner that that particular tenant had terminated the option to buy the property and is no longer there and has no plan to construct this site development permit remodel and expansion, which was very customized to their research and development facility. So the property owner asked whether the city would be willing to revoke the approved site development permit in order for the previously approved expansion, in order for it to become reinstated. Now, typically revocation processes are used when a city desires to revoke or take away some sort of a permit that was issued. And usually it's because there's a violation of some sort, and that is not the case here. And that's what makes it unique, is that it is being requested by the property owner. So we've even called it a surrender of sorts, because the property owner is willing to surrender the approval that runs with the land. You know, one of the reasons the property owner cited was that really the specialized nature of the expansion was not conducive to attracting many tenants or potential buyers who are looking for a more versatile sort of floor plan, and that was what the previous expansion looked like. It was office and warehouse, which is a very versatile configuration. And so therefore staff concurs with the property owner's request and has prepared this consideration for revocation in accordance with the procedures of the Lake Forest Municipal Code. The public was notified of the item through publication in the newspaper, mailings to property owners within 300 feet, posted at cities, libraries, and City Hall. And as required, we did specifically notify the previous applicant of the project that this was happening. And they actually emailed acknowledgement that it was fine and that they had moved on. And with that, staff recommends that the Planning Commission adopt the attached resolution revoking Site Development Permit 5-12-2600. And this concludes my presentation. I can try to address any answers you have. And I'm not actually sure if there's a representative in the audience tonight. I don't see my contact here, so I can try to address anything you have. Thank you.
Thank you for that staff report. That opens it up to any questions from the commission's staff.
I just have a brief observation. I don't think it's going to make any difference tonight. I know it doesn't for me, but you mentioned that the previous tenant had contacted, or responded rather to your contact. That might have been useful to have that as an attachment, just to say, as part of the record, but merely an observation.
All right. I don't have any speaker cards, so before I open the public hearing, do we have any speaker cards? All right. I guess we'll open the public hearing, and I guess we'll bring it back to the commission.
I would just like to say thank you, staff, for your report. I think that Carrie and your staff, you went outside the box on this one to figure it out for the business owner, and it shows with the report, and I applaud your efforts. Thank you.
I would agree with Jolene's, Commissioner Fuentes' comment also. I think you did a really good job on that.
Well, of the five of us, I was the only one that was here when it was approved. This makes perfect sense to me.
I just want to kind of second with some anecdotal, or I guess it'd be a third at this point, what Jolene had said. Commissioner Fuentes, I've seen too many people when I've been on that side of the commission and in front of commissions with clients that say, but we don't have a box for that. We don't know how to check that box. And so, this is one of those situations that doesn't any of the forms that we would normally use, and you guys did a great job of saying, that's okay, we'll figure it out because we need to take care of our business owners and our landowners in the city. So I can really appreciate that, having seen it go less than smoothly on the other side. So,
And I'd like to ditto those everyone's comments. If there's no more comments from the commission.
One more, maybe?
Sure.
If Jerry was the only one here, can we blame it on him?
All right, that brings us to, do we have a motion?
I'll go ahead and move to approve, I'm not sure how we call this, acceptance of the surrender of a site development permit 5-12-2600 and reinstatement of the previous, and I don't have the previous number handy, but it's as cited in the report, and close the report, or close the public hearing.
I'll second the motion.
Yeah, and for clarification, do I need to officially move that we find that it's exempt from the CEQA, or?
I believe the motion essentially moved staff's recommendation,
Okay.
which would be sufficient.
Thank you.
All right, we have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Resolution passes 5-0. So that leads us now to the discussion item. And I think item number 3, Planning Commission Legal Basics, with another staff presentation.
Yes, this evening we've asked our Assistant City Attorney, Mal Richardson, to walk the Planning Commission through some of the legal basics that the Commission operates under. I think you'll find his presentation very helpful as we move forward and conduct business as the Planning Commission.
presentation yet. Is that better? Can you hear me? Once you hear it, Kayla, you'll change your tune. Okay. I'm hurt that there aren't more people here today to hear my presentation. I take that as a personal affront. Maybe next time they'll be more excited to hear about Planning Commission legal basics. My goal is to get to this quickly, but if you have questions, interrupt me, and we can talk through them. The goal of tonight's presentation is to make you guys look good. That's why Guy Smiley, probably the best Sesame Street Muppet ever, is on the front. I mean, he's like the best looking guy ever. So the goal is to have you look good from the dais. The reason that's my goal is not because I care about you, although I do, but it's because I care about the legal issues of the city. If you look good, more likely than not, what you're doing is legally appropriate. It's just kind of how it happens. It's a dovetail relationship. So as long as you look good, likely we're doing things right. Tonight we're going to be talking about procedure, very briefly about the Brown Act, and then about findings. The first and third issues are the way that you look good from the dais and the way that we do things correctly. In the interest of time, I'm going to probably skip over most of the Brown Act because we've discussed that individually, and so you know what's going on there. If you have questions about it, feel free to interrupt me. I'm going to grab my water real quick. So again, the goal is to talk about and present how we can get through a meeting in the most efficient, most transparent, and most productive way possible. The way that we do that is through procedure and through findings. So, parliamentary procedure it's defined as parliamentary law. The most important thing with parliamentary procedure, as far as we're concerned, is that you don't have to follow it. It's not the law. It's simply a nice thing to follow. Now, while it's not the law, if you follow it, it ensures, in most instances, that you abide by the law. So it's my recommendation tonight that you pay close attention to the slides, which we're going to go over very, very quickly, and follow them as much as possible when conducting this meeting, especially the chair and vice chair. It's very important, I think, that we follow what the slides say. Now, the reason for that, and you can't really see that, but that is a bunch of kangaroos in courts, kangaroo court, and the pig is. Hey, this is a bad deal right here. There are two courts right there. One is the Supreme Court, one is the kangaroo court. Anybody who comes to the U.S. Supreme Court assumes, just based on the way that those justices comport themselves, that they're going to get a fair process. If you show up to a court that isn't quite as supreme as the Supreme Court, you're going to question immediately the things that are happening. The way that you comport yourself, the way that you conduct business, is going to either give confidence to the audience or no confidence. I'm employed, unfortunately, in significant part by lawsuits. When people sue us, then I have work to do. I'd prefer not to have that kind of work. People are less likely to sue the city if they have confidence in what you're doing. That's one of the most important reasons for following procedure, because it gives them confidence in your abilities as a body. So again, it's not required, but it makes meetings more efficient, and you're less challengeable. So, a summary of principles. And really, what these principles come back to is what your mom or your dad or your grandma or your grandpa or your uncle, whoever it was that raised you, what they taught you. That's parliamentary procedure. It's just being nice to the person who's sitting next to you or 3 chairs over. So I'm not going to go through all of these issues one by one because there are slides that I want to go over one by one. But the most important thing here is that the chair runs the meeting. And we do a very good job with this. The chair needs to recognize you before you speak, and the chair moves the meeting along. If you disagree with somebody, wait till they're done talking. Ask the chair for the floor. He will give that to you, and then you can address the issue. We address issues and not individuals. If you don't like what CJ said, don't call him ugly or a jerk. Address the issue. You're neither of those things, CJ. And if you were, we wouldn't tell you, because we address issues. So this is just good manners, basic procedure. Any questions so far?
You've done this before, haven't you?
Too many times. Way too, and it takes an hour usually, but if I take an hour, Gail will fire me. So it's not going to take an hour. Okay. Now, these next slides I do want to go through carefully. And the reason for that is that if we follow these steps, we're going to be in a very good place in terms of all of the work that we do. So let's just walk through these steps. This is the basic format for discussing any agenda item. And it may seem like overkill, but we'll get to that discussion later. First, the chair, in this case Andrew, clearly announces the item and states the subject. You always do that. It's a good job. Invite Gail, who will invite her staff to give the staff report and recommendation. Then ask the commissioners if they have questions on item for clarification. So far, so good. Then invite comment on the item, opening the hearing, or comment. We always do that. Okay. This is not that applicable because we haven't had these kinds of issues. But if the chambers fills with 200 people, you can limit the time that is allocated to each person. However, if you give extra time to one person, then everybody gets that time. So if you're feeling magnanimous or shy and unwilling to cut somebody off, just recognize that if they get 5 minutes, everybody else does too. It's a Brown Act requirement. So be aware of that. Sometimes being the bad guy is a good thing for the process. Once the public has commented, the chair invites the commission to discuss the item again. We're always good with that. The chair then, after discussion has taken place, invites a motion on the item and then announces the commissioner's name who made the motion, which might seem like overkill, but again, it slows things down, and so we know exactly what happened. And it makes Peggy's job easy, taking notes, taking minutes to understand who made the motion. Is there a question?
Yeah, going back to the previous slide, I think it was number 4. If from meeting to meeting, is there a precedent set from meeting to meeting, or would it just be that individual meeting?
It's just the individual agenda item.
Okay.
So it's not even meeting to meeting, it's just item to item.
Okay.
Yeah, that's a good question. Okay, so the motion is made. The chairman then announces the motion and the commissioner who made it. Then, after announcing that, invites a second. Now, typically, there's a motion and a second. That's fine, but this is the ideal procedure, especially for difficult issues. When it's a high-profile, difficult issue, it's good to follow this to a T because, again, it slows things down, allows you to think through it, and it lets the audience know what's going on. Once it's seconded, Andrew or whoever's in charge announces the commissioner's name who seconds. After it's made and seconded, the chair repeats the motion or asks the maker of the motion or commission secretary to repeat it. Now, that's important because when we have complex issues or when a motion is made that's not directly in line with staff's recommendation, it's nice to understand exactly what's going to be voted on. If there have been things, conditions added as part of the motion, conditions taken away as part of the motion, it's nice to repeat it and just make sure that everybody knows what page we're on. More often than not, the secretary or Gail or myself is going to kind of have notes, and if you have questions about exactly what's been moved, we can walk you through that. After the motion's been made and seconded and repeated, a discussion of the motion is invited. If that discussion continues on at length, once it's done, again, repeat the motion so everybody knows what page we're on, then ask for a vote on the item. Aye, no, abstain. Abstentions really aren't required unless you're disqualified, in which case you're going to be off the dais. If you're on the dais, then you really should be voting. That's a personal opinion. It's not a legal opinion. You can abstain. I just think it's often chicken. That isn't a legal term. And then the chair announces the result of the vote, which is always done, and what action the commission has taken. We're very good at this. This is important when we have high-profile issues, when things get a little bit convoluted. Always feel free to just take a break, ask staff for clarification, ask for clarification on the motion so we make sure that we get the motion correct when it's made, seconded, and voted on. Any questions about that? Nope. Okay. I'll get to that later. Okay. 11 steps. Isn't that overkill for a simple planning commission meeting? Yes and no. The reality is the planning commission, in some ways unlike the city council, is dealing all the time with constitutional issues, with constitutional rights, property rights and due process rights, right? Those are direct constitutional rights. You need to make sure that everything you're doing is done according to correct process, because if you don't do it right, we're going to get sued and we're going to lose, and you're going to deprive somebody of their constitutional rights. That's just the reality of it. So, yeah, it's a lot, but it ensures that it's done right and ensures also transparency, that the public's business is being done in a way that they understand. Okay. We'll skip that story. All right. So there's the basic motion, which we're all very familiar with, a motion to amend. We sometimes see that, a friendly amendment. There's often substitute motions. Actually, here it's not that often, but that can happen as well. If there are several motions, you vote on them in reverse order. So the last motion made is the first order voted on, and then you go backwards to the original motion. A pet peeve of mine, which you guys don't, I haven't heard it here often, but in some commissions and councils they do it. There are verbs and there are nouns in the English language, okay? A verb is move, to move. That's a verb, right? A noun is motion. You don't say, I'd like to motion that we do X, or I'd like to make a move that we do Y. If you do that, you'll sound silly. You'll be butchering the English language, and you'll have failed third grade, okay? So we make motions and we move. Fair enough? Just a pet peeve of mine. It doesn't change anything legally. Gail, so far so good? You're happy with this? Okay, great. Voting on motions. We've discussed this. Majority is required for all the motions that we deal with. We don't really ever have motions that require 2/3 votes, so we won't discuss those. Abstentions and disqualifications. If there are only 4 commissioners present and the commissioners vote 2-2, what happens is we go to the status quo ante. That is really poor Latin pronunciation for what was in existence before we started, which means if you vote to approve or deny, it just goes back to what was there before, which means there was no permit. So a tie vote is equal to no vote taken, often a denial. So just be aware of that. If you're disqualified because of a financial interest, whether your home is too close or some kind of business interest, you have to announce that conflict from the dais, which is entirely permissible. It's understandable. You step down, leave the room during the voting, come back when it's all done. That is different from an abstention. If for some reason you have to abstain, you can take part in the discussion, you can take part in the entire thing, and then abstain. Typically, the only reason to abstain is, well, I'm not going to go there. Anyway, if you're up there, you should vote. Again, that's just my editorial comments. Okay, courtesy and decorum. We've already kind of gone through this. This goes back to what your mom taught you. Be kind. Andrew is in charge. Regardless of how you feel about Andrew, he's in charge. And if he's gone, Jerry's in charge. They run the meeting. So you need to respect the chair and allow them to call on you, and they will if you put your hand up or say, hey, Jerry, hey, Andrew, call on me. They're going to call on you, but decorum and a smooth meeting ensures that we do things right and we do things legally. If discussion becomes too personal, too loud, too crude, obnoxious in any way, the chair has the right to cut off that discussion. That is not going to happen. This commission gets along. You're just not going to see that happen, but that is a right that is out there. Okay, 2 little pictures here just to kind of illustrate my point. The first is a guy wrapped in red tape, frustrated. That's a straitjacket. It can feel sometimes like these items of procedure are red tape that constrain us. The reality is that if we follow procedure correctly, right, we're free to do things the right way. If you don't follow procedure correctly, things blow up real quick. And it's amazing how fast an orderly meeting can become disorderly, and the police have to be called when procedure's not called. I've been in commission meetings that were going very, very well. The chairperson, and it wasn't here, for about 5-10 minutes allowed open dialogue to take place. And after those 10 minutes of open dialogue, the audience felt this absolute right to own the meeting. And the cops were called, the meeting was shut down. You can lose control very fast. Procedure allows everyone to understand what their place is, what their role is, and how to engage. We don't play Calvin ball. where the only rule is that there are no rules, right? There are rules when it comes to these hearings, and those rules are in place to ensure that we do things legally. Okay? That's it for procedure. Before we go on, any questions about that? Great. I think we're actually pretty good with this. One thing that I did not touch on, and again, like all procedural rules, it's not a law, but it's a best practice. To the extent that you can avoid engaging the audience, you should. The minute that you begin engaging in question and answer with the audience, they feel like this barrier ceases to exist. Now, that's a little bit difficult because you've been put in place to do the people's will. But you can do that without engaging in a back and forth. Individuals have, is it 3 minutes here? 3 minutes to address the commission on any item. What they should do is address the chair, and then if they've got questions, you write those questions down. After the questions are posed, after everyone has spoken, then you address the questions, as opposed to engaging in a back and forth with the audience member. We've seen it a few times, but what happens is, if you engage them with a back and forth up here, when they sit down, they feel much more liberty to shout questions from the audience. And that breaks decorum down very, very quickly and leads to potential due process violations. So again, as you get questions, simply write them down. After they're done speaking, let them know we will address your questions once everybody's had an opportunity to comment. And then, after everyone's commented, you can go through each of those questions and address them as a commission. Does that make sense? Okay, so please avoid that temptation. It generally leads to problems. Okay, we're going to go, let's just briefly talk about the Brown Act in this context, okay? You all know what the Brown Act is. You cannot hold a meeting outside of this context, right? If it's not agendized and noticed, you can't hold that meeting. And a meeting isn't just when you're sitting in a nice suit or dress and talking about the city. It could be held at McDonald's if you have really poor taste in fast food, or anywhere else in the city, right? It could be held at somebody's home or on the phone. If there's a majority of this commission at the same place at the same time discussing planning commission or Lake Forest matters, that's a meeting. And if it's not noticed and agendized, you're breaking the law. Now, these pictures, besides the fact that one of them makes me happy, one of them terrifies me, kind of illustrate a point. Transparency is the whole point of the Brown Act, right? It's put in place so the people who elected the council, who appointed you, can see what's going on, okay? Tiger sharks, bull sharks, the sharks that you don't like because they attack you and eat you. White sharks aren't your concern. They're all over here. They don't attack. But tiger sharks and bull sharks want to eat you for dinner. All right. I'm a surfer, so this is very important to me. They like to attack in murky water. If the water's transparent, they're not going to attack. So the barrel on the left, that's happy place right there. Right. You're going to get barreled. You're going to feel good, and you're not going to get eaten for lunch by a tiger shark. On the right, that's probably a dolphin or it's Photoshop, but regardless, it's terrifying. Okay. It's a bit murkier. If you paddle out in murky water in Hawaii, it's just Russian roulette, right? You're going to get chomped maybe. The same is true with the Brown Act. If you're in murky water, if it's not transparent, you are liable to get attacked, right? Which is a total twisted metaphor, but the reality is you're going to violate the Brown Act. So don't do it. It's about transparency, not about being murky. If you feel like it's murky at all, don't engage. Make sure that you're always swimming in clear water. Good barrel, Gail? You like that picture? All right. Yeah, it is kind of scary. I think it's a dolphin, and that's in Northern California anyway. It's not Hawaii, but it doesn't matter. The point's made. Okay, we're gonna fly through these and get to this right here, because this is where you're going to get burned the most, is with serial meetings. Everything else is really not going to be a huge issue for you, but serial meetings can happen inadvertently, and this is where the Brown Act is most frequently violated. There are two very common forms. There's a spoke and hub, that's the wheel, right? The daisy chain, that's on the right, the kind of chemistry-looking thing right there. In either of those, I'll go in reverse here real quick. A serial meeting, as you all know, is a meeting where the commissioners are not all in the same place, right? But Commissioner A talks to B, who talks to C, and they form a collective concurrence, right? At different times, different places, but they begin to understand what the other commissioner thinks and how they're going to vote. Even though you're not at the same place and same time talking about it, that is a Brown Act violation. The spoken hub is where Commissioner A is the hub, and B and C or B and D talk to A, and then A transmits to each of them how the other person feels on a certain matter. The daisy chain is where A talks to B, B talks to C, and relays to C how A feels, so all three learn what the other knows, right? Daisy chain, spoken hub. Both are violations. The easiest way to avoid this is not to talk with commissioners about these items outside of a meeting. Now, that's not always possible, okay? And it's not illegal to talk to somebody else. If you're going to do that, please be very careful, because you could, Commissioner A could speak with B and say, hey, I'm thinking about this CUP, here are my thoughts on it. That's a completely innocent communication. B then talks to C and says, hey, C, I feel this way about this application, and guess what A told me? He told me X, Y, and Z. Now we have A, B, X, Y, and Z. It's confusing alphabetics. But the reality is, at that point, A, B, and C have engaged in a daisy chain. A, completely inadvertently, has violated the Brown Act, and a violation is a misdemeanor. So just be aware of that. There is that danger out there. Social media, Facebook and Twitter. This is a way to get yourself in hot water very, very quickly. If you post on your Facebook page, or if you tweet out your feelings, your ideas on a certain issue coming before you, and you're friends with your fellow commissioners, they read that, they post back, you have just committed a misdemeanor. Congratulations. So don't post your thoughts on these issues on social media. That's the quickest way to engage in a serial meeting. Does that make sense? Okay. Okay, posting and notice. This really is more for staff, so we won't go over that. Just briefly, the only items that you can act on at a planning commission meeting are those items that are on the agenda. The only items that you can discuss in detail are those items that are on the agenda. If the public comes up and comments on something that is just an absolute genius idea, and you feel like, wow, that is the future of Lake Forest, you can't discuss it. You can briefly comment on it and ask staff to look at it, but the discussion has to take place after it's been noticed and agendized. Okay? Okay. This is the violation. You go to jail, and you get fined $1,000 for violating a misdemeanor. Is jail time likely? Probably not. But front page paper time is certainly likely, and that might be worse than 6 months in county. Maybe not, depending on how much you enjoy prison food. Finally, outside comments. Be aware that your comments and opinions matter. There's case law where a planning commissioner wrote an editorial for his local HOA newsletter, small HOA, a few hundred recipients, not Lake One, right? And said, hey, this issue, I feel this way about it, it shouldn't be approved, et cetera, et cetera. Several months later, that issue came before the planning commission. The commissioner voted on it. Was challenged in court, lost, and the decision was overturned. So when talking with your neighbors, with your friends, with your colleagues, be careful to make it clear that your mind is not made up on any issue. You are called upon to be an impartial decision-making body, much like a judge. You have to be objective. Now, are you going to have opinions going into a matter? Of course you are. If you didn't, you wouldn't be human. Right? But you can have opinions while not having your mind made up. With that in mind, before the public hearing is open, after the staff gives its report and you begin discussing things, be sure at that point not to say, yeah, I'm in favor, I'm opposed, because you want to leave that till after you've heard the public's comment and everything's on the record. Is that clear? Okay. Okay. Findings. 2 + 2 does not equal 5, and if it does, You should talk to my first grader who's figured that it's 4. Findings ensure that you do not come to the wrong conclusion. Okay, 2 + 2 = 4. When you're working through, especially working through difficult entitlement packages, tonight's thing was pretty easy because staff did some pretty heavy lifting to kind of make that work. But when you're working through a difficult tract map, a difficult CUP, where there are 5+ findings to be made, where there are tough conditions, that's an equation. And you have to be very careful that the proofs that you lay out support the conclusion that you make, that 2 + 2 does not equal 5. So findings, this is maybe the most important thing that you guys do. I focused on procedure because if you're procedurally strong, most everything else falls into place, but you could be procedurally pristine. And if your findings don't work, everything is gone, and you're going to get sued and you're going to lose. So findings provide, I'll just read that, a written explanation of why, legally and factually, an agency is making a particular decision. And that is really small font, and I'm really old. But what this does, I'll summarize, is findings provide legal protection for the city. Courts have set an incredibly low bar for cities to win lawsuits. Okay, so and that bar is basically a reasonable person standard. What that means is that if a reasonable person could have decided the way you did, you're good to go. And all that requires is that there's some factual support for the conclusion that you reach. You can really, with any entitlement, you can go either way, as long as you've got adequate facts to support your conclusion. And findings enable you to do that. Okay, findings, when are they required? I can't think of an instance at the Planning Commission level when they're not required. Is there anything that we do where there aren't findings that you can think of? I mean, every entitlement, tract maps, CUPs, SDPs, variances, everything that you see, general plan amendments, has findings attached. And those findings derive either from state law in most instances or from local law, like with the CUP. And those findings are often very detailed. Usually there's 5 or 6 findings, okay? The first step in making good findings is understanding the legal requirements for the entitlement before you. Now, how do you do that? It's really simple. The staff report. They're all right there, okay? Read the staff report and resolution, and the findings are going to be laid out there exactly as they appear in the Muni Code and state law. So if you want to understand what the steps are, just read the documents. Okay, there are 2 approaches to making findings. One is to be ignorant, put your head in the sand, and one is to dress like a complete beast. That is a nice looking coat, and that I think is Sherlock Holmes. But he's known for whatever he's known for, right? He's an investigatory wizard. And my daughter likes this new Sherlock show, which has Cumberbatch Humperdinck, or what's his name? Lucy Liu. Anyway, it's not him, and all the little girls swoon over him. She'd be upset with me. But you need to go Sherlock Holmes style with your findings. You need to look carefully at the record, at the facts, and make sure that there is adequate evidence for what you're doing, so that 2 + 2 does not equal 5. Okay, guidelines for making findings. The most important thing, and if you do this, you're going to pretty much do everything right. Findings must be substantive and cannot just recite the law. Let me give you an example. Every entitlement that we see has a health, safety, and welfare finding. What I mean is the approval, whether it's a CUP, an SDP, a tract map, has to be consistent with the public's health, safety, and welfare. Right? So you have to show that by approving this, we're supporting and not harming health, safety, and welfare. Jolene is yawning. She's already bored stiff. I apologize, Jolene. I'm bored at myself as well. Okay. So here's how you would not make that finding. You would not say this project is consistent with the public's health, safety, and welfare, because you've said nothing by saying that. You've made a conclusion that's not supported by any facts at all. Right? When I was in 6th grade algebra, my teacher always said, show your work. Prove to me how you got there. Findings are all about showing your work, right? What is consistent with what is a good finding is, right, this CUP is appropriately parked, there's adequate parking, those kinds of facts. Therefore, it is consistent with the public's health, safety, and welfare. As long as you can make a therefore statement, you're good to go. Facts, therefore, conclusion. Make sense? Okay. So substantive, don't just recite the law. Okay, findings don't have to be formal, but formal findings are really good policy. We always have formal findings here. The reason for that is that it ensures that if we're sued, we're going to win. You don't have to follow staff's recommendation. There have been times when the commission has not followed staff's recommendation, and that's fine. But what you're going to find is that when that happens, staff is going to ask to come back at a future planning commission meeting with a resolution that mirrors what you have said, because we want to ensure that those findings are laid out in black and white so that the applicant and the public understands what you've done. And that creates a record in the event of any challenge, any court proceedings. So staff always creates really strong findings in the resolutions, and if they don't, then we're going to walk you through your findings and come back with a different resolution. Okay, findings must be set forth clearly, can't be vague or ambiguous. This goes back to the first point where the findings have to be supported by facts that are in the record. You can't just refer to the proceedings and say, yeah, I base my conclusion on everything that was said. Well, that's fantastic, but what specifically do you base it on? You have to give specifics. Okay, we've discussed this. Not only are you free to use the findings that your staff's prepared, you'd be wise to if you agree with what they've concluded. And just a brief aside, this is not part of the presentation. This kind of goes back to making motions. The safest way to make a motion, the way that makes you look best and that protects us best, is if you agree with staff's recommendation. And sometimes it has 5 different items, right? The CUP, tract map, the CEQA, right? Instead of going through each of those things and trying to figure out which CUP it is, it's 2014-15 and this and that, just say I move staff's recommendation. By doing that, you've just moved everything that's in the resolution and the staff report. That keeps you completely clean.
What if I say I motion staff's recommendation?
Then I will walk out. Yeah, so you can motion or you can move. It's legally sufficient, but staff's recommendation, that's the cleanest way to do it. Okay. We usually talk about findings just to support the entitlement that's being granted, right? The STP, the tract map, etc. If you're going to impose unusual or onerous conditions of approval on a project, you also have to have findings for that. Now, I have not seen this happen at this planning commission, but sometimes there are high-profile projects, difficult projects, where you may want to require that the applicant do something that's very expensive, like install a traffic light at the corner. Okay, that's going to cost them 6 figures. And while they may get their approval, it's not a very happy victory for them because the approval came at a significant cost. They may still challenge that in court. In fact, they likely will if you're imposing onerous conditions. If you're going to impose those conditions, those should also be supported with findings. And if that comes up, we'll walk you through that because I'm very sensitive to, it's called the nexus issue, but there has to be a nexus or a connection, a direct connection between conditions imposed and the burden created by the project. We can't just impose conditions willy-nilly. And if I see that happening, then I'll chime in and let you know that, hey, we're either going too far afield or we have to have findings in place to support our imposition of this condition. Okay, making the connections. That may be a picture of Bigfoot, or it may be a picture of some guy dressed as Bigfoot, and that's either a giraffe in water or it's the Loch Ness Monster. We don't know. right? We don't know because the connections haven't been made sufficient for us to know. You have to have facts to support your conclusions. Otherwise, they're myths, fantastic myths, but myths. And in this world, as opposed to that world, if your myths get challenged in court, we lose, and that is not a very, very fun day. Okay, sources that you can use to support your findings: staff reports, written and oral testimony, documents, exhibits. Everything here has one thing in common. They've all been placed before the commission during the hearing. Anything that is not placed before the commission during the hearing cannot form the basis of your findings.
Oral testimony, I mean, doesn't necessarily need to be expert testimony. If we're, like in your example, you talk about requiring that you can do your renovation, but you have to put a traffic signal in on the corner. If we've got 10 citizens out here who came forward and during public comments said that intersection's already crazy, and if you let them do this, it's going to be even worse. We don't feel safe. We could use that as a basis for a finding that we want this. You need to signalize the intersection, or is that too anecdotal?
No, it's a good question. Let's pull back from that example, because the traffic light is a six-figure imposition. Let's talk about say a restaurant that wants to go into a strip mall, and the strip mall already has parking issues and circulation issues, and all of the strip mall, or is it called strip center? What's the PC term for strip mall nowadays? Strip mall. All right. Strip mall it is. Every tenant comes in and says, we have major circulation issues here, okay? And they happen at 5 p.m. and at 8 a.m. And if this restaurant goes in right now, as it's currently parked and circulated, it's really not going to work. But if they just made this tweak, it would work, right? And if they all came in, that's absolutely sufficient oral testimony. With the signal issue, if we had everyone come in and say, hey, big problem, we probably want to, as staff, pull back and continue the item and take a deeper look at it, because that would significantly impact the applicant. But yes, you can use oral testimony. If it's one person who comes in and it's some anecdote, it's just weighing the evidence. It's like anything else. Any argument you make, people will believe you if your evidence has value, if it holds weight. Okay, unacceptable sources or forms of findings. You can't, as I said, just refer to the transcript of the debate. Hey, we heard lots of good stuff, and based on that lots of good stuff, I make my findings X, Y, and Z. You have to be specific. And we've already talked about boilerplate findings or conclusory findings, the finding that says this project is consistent with health, safety, and welfare. There have to be facts to support your conclusion. Okay, and this is just a summary slide on how to correctly make a finding, right? I'll let you take a look at those on your own, but this just gets back to the basic concept that you have a conclusion over here, right? It's the finding that you want to make. And to get there, you have to take all of the steps to make that conclusion. And those steps are all about having facts from the record, evidence to support your conclusion. It's really that simple. And the most important thing is just articulating the facts and the reasoning that get you to your conclusion. And again, if you agree with staff's recommendation, and if you feel like the findings that they've articulated are accurate, you just have to move their recommendation and you're clean. If you want to add to their findings, add facts that you feel are important, you can do that. That becomes part of the record, and it further bolsters our position in the event of a challenge. So, conclusion. It says here, making findings is an integral part of the process. Really, it is the most important part. It is the integral part of the process. Clear, well-reasoned findings, whether the staff prepares them or you prepare them, do two things. They reduce the public's doubts about your decision, and they keep us clean with regard to a lawsuit. And this takes us full circle, right? If the public feels comfortable with what you're doing, we're not going to be challenged, because what you're doing is correct. Even if an applicant disagrees with you, if if he or she feels comfortable that he or she has gotten a fair shake, they're not going to challenge unless they've got some crazy attorney who just wants to make a buck. If they challenge, they're going to lose. And finally, full circle, if you do this, if you make proper findings, take the time to slow down, walk through each of the steps carefully, and if you take the time to walk through each of the procedural steps, all 11 steps, you're going to look really good up there. And if you look good, the work's going to be done well, it'll be done transparently, and most importantly, it will be done lawfully. People's due process rights and property rights will be protected. Which takes us to any questions that you may have. And I believe that that was under half an hour. Yeah? Typically an hour presentation. I deserve all your Andes mints. Any questions about anything? I don't do red vines. I think Gail will do red vines.
Actually, no. Actually, I have a comment. As staff planners, we're creating the findings, and we often start with the findings. This is the finding I'm seeking to create here, that the on-site circulation pattern is adequate and will not impact adjacent businesses. So when we write the staff report, we try and give you all of the information that we use to get there. So the finding is kind of the summary of it, but what is included in your staff report is all the things you would need to know about this site in order for you to get there as well. So that's why we'll include, we'll describe it, we'll include exhibits, we'll draw on the exhibits, we'll include an aerial photograph, we'll talk about surrounding businesses, we'll say this one's 60 feet tall and that one's 70. So the volume of information that's in the staff report is there to help you get to those findings. So the staff report and the findings really have an integral relationship as well.
And it's important to note that, especially on big projects, we work very closely to make those findings tight. Staff will send me over draft findings, and I'll spend time making sure that that they're legal, and that in the event of challenge, we're going to be clean. So what you see in your staff report is always clean. You may not agree with it, which is fine, and we'll come back and do the exact same thing if you disagree with your findings. We'll make them clean, we'll make them airtight. So, but staff spends a lot of time on those findings, so you can feel very confident that what you're seeing is clean and legal. Anything else?
Yeah, I thank you. I think this is a great presentation, 30 minutes or less. That's really much appreciated, I'm sure. I think that you have always conducted yourself in an extremely professional manner and guided this commission from the years that I've been on it and you've been here. We rely heavily on you and Gail also, and Cheryl when Gail's not here, even when Gail is here. The cohesiveness, the way that this runs is really good, but having a newer commission up here, this is really, I think, very valuable. Okay, so I want to comment on that. And then I'd also like to congratulate you for getting St. Patrick's Day underway with your tie.
Oh, look at that. It was even inadvertent. That's how Irish I am. It seeps out at 5 a.m. when I get dressed. Thanks, Jerry. CJ?
I'm just curious if this qualifies for MCLE.
No, but you can report it and see if they catch you.
Thankfully, I don't need it anymore.
Yeah.
Any other comments or questions?
I'd just like to thank you for that. Was a very fine presentation. I got a lot out of it. Thank you.
Thanks. And if you have any questions going forward, I hope you all have my cell phone and my desk line. You can always call me.
Should we give it out publicly?
Sure. Why not? Gail, what's your number? If you need my contact info, just talk to me. You can always call, and I can walk you through issues, procedural issues, finding issues, or specific issues to the entitlements that we're dealing with.
No, thank you. I think this is a great presentation too. I think all of us from the dais appreciated it. It's a great refresher, even probably for staff and for the members of the audience. What a treat! You didn't think you were getting this tonight, did you? This is like Planning Commission 101 here, for your benefit too.
Early birthday present. Thanks.
Thank you. So that leads us to director's comments.
Well, I have just one comment. At our last meeting, I mentioned that the League of California Cities puts on a program once a year specifically for new commissioners. I told you I would look into it. I knew it was coming up. Unfortunately, it's a Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and Thursday we're here for a planning commission meeting. And so that is why we decided we could have Mal do a better job than you would have had at the League of California Cities without a trip to Sacramento. So I appreciate that. But that's the kind of information that those seminars, those introductory seminars have. And so we have the program, and we'll be going through several of the topics whenever we have an agenda that's lighter, so we can cover things like CEQA, this California Environmental Quality Act, and other things. And we also have an item coming forward on our next agenda, I believe, and we will be asking you what additional topics you'd like to get some information on. So thank you, Mal. That was great. And A for the graphics in that presentation. I like them very much.
That leads us to any additional comments.
I think I exhausted my allocated time for tonight, so I'll pass.
All right, we'll bring it back up here. Any commissioner comments?
I'd just like to ask Professor Richardson to not bolt. As soon as we're done, I have a quick question for him.
Great. Okay, there we have Commissioner Fuentes.
I'd just like to say that Gail and I stopped by the opening of Sammy's tonight, and it looks like they have quite a booming business going on. I did not win. Of course, they weren't betting tonight either. So anyway, that was fun, and there was the ribbon cutting ceremony, and Councilman Voights was there. So anyway, go visit Sammy's. It smelled really good. We didn't have time to stay and eat, but it smells yummy.
Commissioner Verplank.
Yeah, I do have a couple of things. First of all, I would like to commend Chairman Andrew on his first meeting. A job well done. So I think you have a lot of opportunities ahead that you will meet head-on and very well. I would like to, this was for staff, if we could work on getting some kind of an acknowledgement for Jerry Zachmeister for the 11 years of service that he's had on the Planning Commission. That would be a really great thing to do, I think. And Cheryl, I don't know if I didn't catch it or not. I think a few months back I mentioned the lights on the two Del Taco restaurants, and I had never heard anything back on that, and I came by there one night recently, and it looked like we were in Las Vegas again with the bright lights from the rooftops. Yeah, so, and I'm not sure. I'm just checking to see if those were ever properly authorized, I guess.
We'll take a look and get back to you.
I appreciate that.
Soon.
Great.
Sorry
and,
about that.
Okay, and the last thing is, great. This was a short meeting. There wasn't a whole lot to do here tonight. However, what was done here tonight, I think, is going to serve for years to come. Great. Thank you, staff.
Ditto that. Anyone else? I just have one item. I know this may sound like the definition of insanity, and you'll get this after I speak a little further, but we had an agenda item. I think it was one of the minor cellular wireless equipment facility items, and a comment in the staff report said that the cell phone reception, we've had many complaints from citizens, and I still think that this is an important issue to consider because I have not taken a position on anything yet, and accordingly don't have any findings. But I still think that this is an item that we could address as a commission, and that's all I have to say. So with that, I think the meeting is adjourned at 8:02.